Ladies and gentlemen, let me share something with you today that has the power to change the course of your life. Not overnight, but inevitably. And it starts with a simple idea about learn not to be dependent on others. Now, I didn't say don't value others. I didn't say don't work with others. And I surely didn't say don't love others. I said don't be dependent on them. There's a difference, a big one. Depending on others means your success is in someone else's hands. Depending on others means your joy, your finances, your future are all being held like a puppet string in someone else's fingers. And let me tell you, that's a dangerous game. Now here's the truth. You were not designed to be carried all your life. You were designed to walk, to run, to build, to grow, to stand tall, not lean forever. You can lean for a season. We all do, but not for a lifetime. Self-reliance is the foundation of lasting success. That idea may sound simple, even obvious, but it holds a level of power that most people overlook. In a world filled with noise, opinions, and shifting circumstances, there is one constant you can always count on: you. Learning to rely on yourself isn't about isolation or arrogance. It's about building a foundation that doesn't crack when life starts shaking. And let me tell you, life will shake. It doesn't ask for permission. It just does what it does. The question is, have you built something solid inside yourself that can hold steady when everything around you is uncertain? Think about it. If your peace, your confidence, or your success is dependent on someone else, whether that's a partner, a friend, a company, or even the government, then you're always one decision away from losing it all. Someone else's decision, not yours. And that's not stability. That's not success. That's a borrowed life. And what's borrowed must one day be returned. Now, there's nothing wrong with receiving help. We all need help at times. We all need a boost, a hand, a door to open. But help should never become a habit. Help should never become the foundation. It should be a bridge, not the road. When people lean on help too long, they forget how to stand. And when you forget how to stand, you forget how to grow. And when you forget how to grow, life doesn't wait. It moves on without you. So the real journey begins when you stop saying, I hope someone saves me, and start saying, I'll save myself. That shift, that moment when you stop blaming and start building, is the beginning of real change. That's the seed of self-reliance. And like any seed, it takes time, effort, and care to grow. But once it grows, it becomes something incredibly powerful. It becomes confidence. Not the loud kind, not the arrogant kind, but the quiet, steady kind that says, no matter what happens, I'll figure it out. You see, self-reliance isn't about knowing everything. It's about being willing to learn. It's about developing the discipline to do the work. It's about saying, even if I don't have all the tools right now, I can find them, I can learn them, I can build them. That kind of mindset, where you become a student of life and a master of your own future, is what separates people who survive from people who succeed. Too often, people wait. They wait for someone to give them permission. They wait for someone to notice them. They wait for perfect timing. But self-reliance doesn't wait. It moves. It creates. It knocks on doors. And when no one answers, it builds its own. That's how success is born. Not in the comfort of dependence, but in the fire of effort. In the grind. In the willingness to wake up each day and push forward, no matter who shows up to help. And here's the beauty of it, the more you rely on yourself, the stronger you become. Each time you solve a problem on your own, your confidence grows. Each time you face a fear and keep going, your courage builds. Every skill you learn, every book you read, every hour you spend improving yourself, those are bricks. Bricks in the foundation of your life. And when storms come, and they will, you'll be glad you laid them down. It's not easy. In fact, it's much easier to stay dependent. To complain. To make excuses, to wait, but ease never built anything worth having. Easy doesn't lead to fulfillment. What does? Growth. responsibility, ownership. When you take ownership of your choices, your habits, your direction, everything begins to change. Slowly at first, then all at once. When you become self-reliant, you stop chasing approval. You stop needing validation. You stop begging for opportunities. And instead, you start creating them. You walk into rooms differently. You speak with conviction. You look in the mirror and see someone you can count on. Someone you respect. And that's rare in today's world. But it's available to anyone willing to earn it. What most people don't realize is that the journey toward self-reliance is actually the journey toward freedom. Because once you trust yourself, you're no longer a hostage to anyone else's decisions, moods, or limitations. You don't need to manipulate people or try to control outcomes. You simply become someone who knows how to steer your own ship regardless of the weather. Depending on others makes your future vulnerable. It's a truth that's uncomfortable for many people to hear, but ignoring it doesn't make it any less real. When your life is built around the hope that someone else will always show up, always do the right thing, always carry the weight, you're setting yourself up for disappointment, for frustration, and most of all, for weakness. Because the reality is, people are people. They have their own problems, their own priorities, their own distractions. No one is going to care about your future more than you do. And if you're not holding the wheel, then who is? The moment your success relies on someone else doing their part, showing up, or keeping their promise, you've handed over the keys to your life. And sometimes they'll drop those keys. Not out of malice. Not because they want to ruin your life. But because people forget. People change. People leave. That's life. And when you've spent all your time depending instead of developing, you're left unprepared. Too many people sit around with their lives on pause, waiting for someone to fix it. Waiting for a mentor to hand them the answers. Waiting for a partner to give them the confidence. Waiting for a friend to lift them up. But time doesn't wait. Opportunity doesn't wait. The world keeps moving, and if you're not ready to move with it, you get left behind. You can't afford to gamble your future on someone else's consistency. That's a bet you will lose more times than you'll win. Let's be honest. There's something appealing about depending on others. It feels safe. It feels easy. Someone else takes the hit. Someone else makes the decision. You don't have to take the risk. You don't have to face the failure. But that comfort is a trap. It's a short-term relief with long-term consequences. Because the more you depend on others, the less you grow. The less you try. The less you learn. And over time, you become less capable. What happens when the person you're leaning on stumbles? What happens when your support system gets shaken? If your confidence is built on someone else's encouragement, what happens when they're no longer there to give it? If your income relies entirely on a single job, or a single client, or a single industry, what happens when things change? This is not about fear. It's about realism. Life is unpredictable. The one thing you can control is how prepared you are to adapt. And dependency isn't always obvious. Sometimes it hides in the way you ask for advice. Sometimes it shows up in how you need to be constantly reassured. Sometimes it's in the way you avoid responsibility and shift blame. But at its core, dependence is about surrendering power. And when you give away that power, you give away your future. Because the more hands your life depends on, the more likely someone's going to drop it. Now, this doesn't mean you have to do everything alone. But there's a big difference between collaborating and relying. Between working with someone and needing them. Between trusting people and being helpless without them. It's about the balance. It's about building a life where help is appreciated, not required. Where relationships are chosen, not clung to out of fear. When you develop yourself to the point where you can stand, think, decide, and act without needing someone to walk you through it, You begin to experience a different level of life. You don't just react to the world anymore. You shape it. You're not waiting for someone to pick you. You're picking yourself. That kind of strength doesn't come from dependency. It comes from ownership, from effort, from doing what's hard so you can live what's great. Depending on others often starts small. Maybe you rely on a friend to motivate you. Maybe you expect your partner to always lift your spirits. Maybe you think your success is tied to someone giving you a chance. But over time, those small habits turn into patterns. And those patterns become chains. They hold you back from discovering what you're capable of. They keep you from taking full control. Because every time you defer responsibility, you delay your growth. It's tempting to look at someone else and think, if only they'd help me more, if only they'd support me, I could make it. But the truth is, you don't need more support. You need more self-belief. You don't need someone else to open the door. You need to learn how to knock, how to build, how to lead. That kind of mindset doesn't make you arrogant. It makes you strong. It makes you free. It puts your future back where it belongs, in your own hands. Personal growth begins with personal responsibility. It's not something that happens by accident, and it's certainly not something that someone else can do for you. Growth is intentional. It's deliberate. And it starts the moment you stop pointing fingers at the world around you and start looking inward. When you decide that your life is yours. Not your parents, not your teachers, not your bosses, not your partners. You begin to understand the power you actually hold. That's where growth begins. Not in luck, not in circumstances, but in ownership. Taking responsibility doesn't mean blaming yourself for everything that goes wrong. It means accepting that your response is your responsibility. Life is going to happen. There will be losses, setbacks, unfair moments. That's not your fault. But how you deal with it, how you get up, how you learn, how you move forward, that is yours. And that's the key. That shift from victim to student is where growth lies. The moment you stop asking, why is this happening to me? And start asking, what can I learn from this? That's when change begins. You can't grow by waiting. You can't grow by wishing. You grow by doing. And doing starts with deciding. Deciding that no matter what's happened in the past, you're in charge of the next step. Because the truth is, no one is coming to save you. No one is obligated to fix your life. And they shouldn't be. It's your life, your choices, your time. And when you take ownership of those things, everything else starts to open up. Responsibility is not a burden. It's freedom. It's the freedom to say, I don't like where I am, but I can do something about it. It's the freedom to choose your attitude, your response, your path forward. A lot of people talk about wanting change, wanting growth, wanting success. But they skip over this first step. They want results without responsibility. They want the fruit without planting the seed. But it doesn't work like that. Responsibility is the price of progress. And you pay that price daily. In your habits, in your decisions, in how you spend your time. It's easy to say, if only my boss were better, or if only I had more support, or if only I grew up differently. And maybe all those things are true. But the more time you spend focusing on what you can't control, the less time you spend improving what you can. And that's where most people get stuck. They're so busy explaining their limitations that they never activate their potential. They rehearse their excuses more than they practice their abilities. And that's a tragedy, because every single person has the ability to grow, if they're willing to take responsibility. And responsibility doesn't mean you never ask for help. It means when you ask for help, you do so with the intent to build, not to be rescued. It means you come to the table with effort, with intention, with a willingness to learn. When you take responsibility for your own learning, your own growth, your own mistakes, you gain power. Real power. Because you're no longer waiting for the world to hand you something. You're creating your own momentum. People who grow the most are people who own their flaws. They don't hide from their weaknesses. They study them. They don't blame others for their failure. They take notes and try again. They don't expect someone to carry them. They learn how to walk. And when they fall, they don't stay down. They ask, "What did this teach me?" That's personal responsibility in action. That's what leads to growth that actually lasts. You won't get everything right. That's not the goal. The goal is to stay in the driver's seat, to be the one steering, adjusting, learning along the way. That doesn't mean the road will be smooth. But at least it'll be yours. At least you'll know that no matter what happens, you had the courage to own it. And that ownership builds something inside you that can't be taken away. Most people are afraid of responsibility because it's heavy. But what they don't realize is that avoiding responsibility is heavier. It keeps you stuck. It keeps you small. It keeps you waiting for someone to come along and give you permission to grow. But when you choose responsibility, you give yourself that permission. You take your life off hold. You move from hoping to building. And that's where personal growth truly begins. Build skills that make you valuable and independent. That's a simple statement with enormous depth. In a world that's constantly changing, technology evolving, markets shifting, industries rising and falling, one of the smartest decisions you can make is to develop skills that no one can take from you. Skills that put you in control of your future. Skills that speak for you when nobody else will. When you focus on building yourself, you no longer have to chase opportunity. It starts to find you. Because value always attracts attention, and independence keeps you from being trapped. The most dangerous place to be in life is where you don't know how to do anything that the world needs. When you lack useful skills, you become dependent. Dependent on jobs you don't enjoy. Dependent on people who don't respect your time. Dependent on circumstances staying the same. And the truth is, they never stay the same. The world changes, and if you haven't been growing, you fall behind. You lose options. You lose leverage. And eventually, you lose confidence. But when you have skills, real valuable skill changes. You start to walk differently. You don't have to beg. You don't have to wait. You become someone who solves problems, creates value, and earns respect. And that doesn't mean you have to be an expert in everything. But it does mean you're always learning, always sharpening, always pushing yourself to get better. Because every skill you build adds a brick to your foundation. And the stronger that foundation, the more you can handle, the more you can build, the more you can create. Skills are a form of wealth. Unlike money, they can't be stolen. Unlike luck, they can't run out. Unlike status, they don't fade with time. They stay with you, and they compound. One skill leads to another. Communication leads to leadership. Discipline leads to productivity. Creativity leads to innovation. The more you stack them, the more powerful you become. And power isn't about control. It's about freedom. The freedom to choose your path, to walk away from what doesn't serve you, to say yes or no without fear. A lot of people want independence, but they don't want to pay the price. They want to feel secure, but they don't want to do the uncomfortable work of becoming valuable. It doesn't work like that. Value doesn't come from wishes. It comes from work. It comes from investing your time into something that pays you back for a lifetime. And it doesn't matter where you start. What matters is that you start. Read the books. Watch the lessons. Try, fail, improve. That's the process. And if you stay in that process long enough, you'll separate yourself from the crowd. Don't let the fear of not being good stop you. Everyone starts not being good. The difference is some people stay there and others grow. And those who grow are the ones who show up every day with the mindset of a builder. They say, "I may not know how yet, but I'm going to learn. And that mindset creates momentum. It creates belief. It creates proof that you can rely on yourself. Because with every skill you develop, you become more capable, more confident, and more in control of your future. Skills also protect you. When things go wrong, and they will, your skills are what keep you steady. When the economy shifts, your skills are your insurance. When people let you down, your skills are your backup plan. You don't have to panic when you know how to create value. You don't have to cling to things that aren't right for you. Because you know that, no matter where you are, you can bring something to the table. That's what independence looks like. Not needing the world to carry you, because you've learned how to carry yourself. It's not just about income, either. It's about identity. When you build skills, you start to see yourself differently. You stop thinking like a follower. You start thinking like a leader. You stop asking, can I do this? And start asking, how can I get better at this? That shift in perspective changes everything. It gives you control. It gives you choices. It gives you the ability to shape your life instead of waiting for someone else to do it. You don't have to master 100 things, but you do need to master a few things that matter. Things that solve problems. Things that serve others. Things that challenge you. Those are the skills that give you options. And options are the true currency of freedom. When you have skills, you have the tools to build whatever kind of life you want, regardless of where you started or what you lacked in the beginning. Self-discipline is the bridge between your goals and your achievements. Without it, your dreams remain ideas, unrealized, untouched, and eventually forgotten. Discipline is the engine that keeps your life moving in the direction you want, especially when motivation fades. Because motivation is a spark, but discipline is the fuel. It's what keeps you showing up when no one's watching. It's what gets you out of bed when comfort calls you to stay. And it's what allows you to choose long-term success over short-term pleasure. You don't need to feel inspired every day, but you do need to be consistent. That consistency comes from discipline, not mood. Every meaningful accomplishment is built on the foundation of doing what's necessary, not just what's easy. Most people don't fail because they don't have talent. They fail because they haven't trained themselves to act regardless of how they feel. Discipline says, I do it anyway. When it's boring, when it's slow, when it's inconvenient, when it's uncomfortable, you do it anyway. That's where the real edge comes from. Not in bursts of excitement, but in the quiet decisions you make over and over again. The people who build great things, who live strong lives, who achieve their visions, those are the people who have learned how to tell themselves no. No to distractions. No to excuses. No to the voice that says, you can skip it today. They know that every time you choose what's easy over what's right, you're voting against your own future. And every time you follow through, no matter how small the task, you're building a reputation with yourself. You're proving that you can be counted on. That's what discipline gives you. Trust in yourself. You can't outsource discipline. No one can give it to you. It doesn't come in a book or a podcast or a motivational video. It comes from the choices you make when no one is looking. When it's just you and the task, you and the silence, you and the resistance. And it's not about being perfect. It's about being committed. You miss one day. You get back up the next. You fail at something. You figure out why, and you try again. Discipline isn't rigid. It's resilient. It adapts. It grows. And it carries you through when everything else feels uncertain. When you're disciplined, you don't need to chase every opportunity that shows up. You become more selective. You know what matters and you direct your energy toward it. You become less reactive, more intentional. Less emotional, more focused. That doesn't mean you ignore how you feel, but it means you don't let how you feel make the final decision. You let your principles lead. You let your values lead. And that's how you build a life that lasts. Discipline doesn't just make you more productive. It makes you more powerful. Because when you know how to take action consistently, you become the kind of person who finishes what they start. You become reliable, dependable, not just to others, but to yourself. That's a rare thing. Most people struggle with discipline because they haven't practiced it. They try to do everything at once and then give up when it gets hard. But real discipline isn't built in extremes. It's built in daily decisions, in routine, in saying, just one more rep, just one more step. Discipline also creates space for freedom. It sounds like a paradox, but it's true. The more disciplined you are with your time, the more time you end up having. The more disciplined you are with your money, the more financial freedom you create. The more disciplined you are with your focus, the more clarity you gain. Discipline simplifies life. It removes the noise. It keeps you centered when the world tries to pull you in every direction. You can't fake discipline. You can pretend for a little while, but eventually your habits expose your standards. And your standards determine the level of your life. You don't rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems. Discipline is the system that supports your ambition. It's the scaffolding that lets you climb higher without collapsing. And it's not something you're born with. It's something you build, decision by decision, moment by moment. The best part is that discipline, once developed, becomes part of who you are. It no longer feels like a chore. It becomes natural. You start to feel uncomfortable when you're off track. That's how you know it's working. When doing the right thing becomes your default, not your exception. When keeping your word to yourself becomes a habit, not a struggle. That's when you know you're building something strong. Something that won't be shaken by a bad day or a rough week. Something that lasts. Waiting for others to validate your path is one of the surest ways to delay your progress. If you spend your time seeking approval, you end up shaping your life around other people's opinions instead of your own convictions. And the problem with that is simple. Opinions change, people change, and if your sense of direction depends on their validation, then your direction changes with them. You lose your sense of purpose, your internal compass, your ability to trust yourself. That's why independence begins with self-trust. You have to learn how to move forward even when no one claps for you, even when no one says, "Good job." Because if you only act when others approve, you'll never act enough. You don't need permission to grow. You don't need a panel of judges to stamp your worth. You don't need your friends to understand your dream. Sometimes they won't. Sometimes they can't. That's okay. It's not their dream. It's yours. And because it's yours, you're the one who has to protect it. You're the one who has to believe in it when no one else sees the picture. Most people don't see the vision until it's finished. They applaud the result but ignore the process. So if you want to build something meaningful, you can't wait for applause. You have to become your own source of conviction. Seeking constant validation trains your mind to depend on external voices. And when those voices go quiet, or turn negative, you crumble. But when your sense of value comes from within, you become unshakable. You listen, yes. You stay humble. But you don't let opinions outweigh your own sense of direction. And that takes practice. You have to learn to sit in the silence and still move. To walk into uncertainty without a cheering crowd. That's real strength. That's real clarity. It doesn't mean you ignore feedback. It means you filter it. You take what helps and leave what doesn't. You weigh advice against your own principles, your own values. Because not all feedback is wise. Not all criticism is constructive. And not all praise is genuine. If you're always reacting to what others say, changing course, doubting yourself, hesitating, you never develop the confidence to lead your own life. And leadership at its core starts with leading yourself. Many people don't move because they're afraid of being judged. They worry what their family will say, what their friends will think, how strangers will react. But here's the truth. People are going to judge you no matter what. You might as well be judged for building something that matters to you. You might as well be misunderstood in the pursuit of your own vision than be accepted for following someone else's. The cost of fitting in is often far greater than the cost of standing out. Because when you try to please everyone, you end up pleasing no one. Not even yourself. Approval is addictive. And like any addiction, it feels good at first, but becomes a trap. You start doing things not because they're right, but because they get you a reaction. You shape your work around likes, your choices around compliments, your goals around what others will admire. But all of that is temporary. What matters is whether you can live with your own decisions when the noise dies down. Whether you can look in the mirror and say, "If I stayed true to what I believe, even when it wasn't popular." That's where peace comes from. That's where confidence lives, and sometimes, the people closest to you won't understand. Not because they don't care, but because they haven't seen what you see. They haven't walked in your shoes, lived your battles, carried your vision. Don't resent them. Don't argue. Just keep moving. Let your results speak for you. Let your work explain the silence. Because once you start growing without needing constant affirmation, you become unstoppable. You develop internal validation, the ability to encourage yourself, to stay the course. To find your own rhythm of validation isn't wrong. We all need encouragement from time to time. But depending on it is dangerous, because it means your belief in yourself is conditional. It rises and falls based on someone else's mood or opinion. That's a fragile way to live. You want a belief that's stable, strong, grounded in your own effort and clarity. And you build that by doing the work whether anyone notices or not. By making progress even when no one sees. By committing to the vision, even when the crowd is silent. When you stop needing validation, you become free. Free to make bold moves. Free to take risks. Free to explore, to experiment, to grow. You stop performing and start becoming. You stop acting for the crowd and start acting from the core. And that's where your real power is. Not in being liked, but in being real. Not in being accepted, but in being aligned. Not in being validated, but in being true to what you were called to do. You have to take full ownership of your choices and your results if you want to live a strong, independent life. Responsibility isn't a burden. It's the beginning of freedom. Because when you take responsibility, you're no longer waiting on anyone else to make things right for you. You're not blaming the past, not pointing fingers, not handing over your power to circumstances. You're saying, "This is my life, and I'm going to take control of what I can." That kind of mindset changes everything. It turns you from a victim into a creator, from a passenger into a driver, from someone who reacts into someone who leads. It's easy to blame. It feels good for a while. It takes the pressure off. It lets you believe that your problems aren't your fault, that your failures are someone else's doing. But that kind of thinking will trap you. It will keep you small. It will convince you that you're powerless. And once you believe you're powerless, you stop trying. You stop learning. You stop growing. Responsibility isn't about guilt. It's about ownership. It's about being honest enough to admit, maybe I played a part in this. And if I did, then I can also change it. That's the door to growth. That's the first step toward freedom. If you wait for perfect conditions, for someone to come along and fix everything, you'll be waiting forever. Conditions are never perfect. Life is unpredictable. People will let you down. Plans will fall apart. But when you take responsibility, you stop waiting. You start building. You say, even if this isn't my fault, it's still my future. And I'm going to do something about it. That's how you get your power back. not by controlling everything, but by controlling your response. By focusing on what you can do today with what you've got, instead of wishing things were different, the moment you decide to take full responsibility is the moment you begin to change. It might feel uncomfortable. It might feel heavy at first, but it's also the most empowering decision you'll ever make. Because once you stop blaming, you stop giving away your energy. You stop living in the past. You stop carrying the weight of excuses, and you start creating momentum. You start making progress. You start proving to yourself that you're capable, resourceful, and resilient. People who succeed long-term are not the ones who had the easiest path. They're the ones who owned their path. They didn't pretend things were always fair. They didn't pretend they had all the advantages. But they made a decision not to be defined by what went wrong. They focused on what they could do with what they had. And that mindset created results. That mindset made them unstoppable. Because when you take responsibility, nothing is wasted. Every setback becomes a lesson. Every mistake becomes a teacher. Every challenge becomes an opportunity to grow stronger. It's not always easy to admit your role in a situation. It's tempting to point out what others did wrong. But the truth is, the more time you spend thinking about what they did, the less time you spend working on what you can do. And if you want to grow, you have to shift that focus. Not because you're letting people off the hook, but because you're letting yourself off the hook of being stuck. Responsibility isn't about taking blame that doesn't belong to you. It's about refusing to give others control over your mindset, your emotions, and your actions. Every time you say, "I take full responsibility," you take a step forward. You step into leadership. You step into ownership. You step into possibility. That doesn't mean you have to have all the answers right away. It just means you're committed to finding them. You're committed to being a person who grows, not a person who hides. A person who creates, not one who complains. A person who says, "No matter how this started, I'm going to choose how it ends." See, responsibility also brings clarity. When you stop waiting on others to fix things, you start thinking more clearly about what actually needs to change. You start focusing your time and energy on solutions instead of problems. You stop gossiping and start planning. You stop complaining and start acting. That clarity leads to power. And that power leads to momentum. And momentum is what takes you places that blame never could. You don't need anyone's permission to take control of your life. You don't need perfect circumstances. What you need is a decision. A decision to stop avoiding, stop waiting, stop deflecting. A decision to say, "This is mine. My goals, my mindset, my direction, my next step." Because once you take responsibility, you stop being a passenger in your own story. You start becoming the author. You start writing new chapters. And you stop living by default and start living by design. So here's where it all comes together. You learn, you grow, you build discipline. You silence the noise. You stop chasing validation. And you take full ownership of your life. That's how you stop depending on others. Not because you don't need people, but because you've learned to stand strong on your own 2 feet. You've developed the mindset, the discipline, the clarity, and the responsibility that separate the ones who drift from the ones who lead. You've stopped waiting for someone to come save you because you realized you are the one. And once you live like that, truly live like that, your life is no longer something that happens to you. It's something you create, shape, and own every single day.